If you are traveling to Thailand under the Thai Pass system, that means that you were approved by the Thai government by December 22nd, and that your travel is going to take place, I think now the rule is before January 15th. But if you have the Thailand Pass, that means that you already had your Shopless Plus hotel booked with a package for your PCR test and the quarantine, and that all those things are in order. So if that's you, I want to tell you about my experience with traveling to Thailand and getting the PCR test and that second test that they're requiring now. And I think if you're staying longer, there's even a third test that's required while you're in the country. So when I left Utah, I had a requirement before I got on the flight to have a PCR test no more than 72 hours before I got on that flight. So I got my test about 60 hours before the flight left from Las Vegas, and then I realized that I had a layover overnight in Seattle, and I didn't want anything to go wrong with the trip, so I went and got a second RT-PCR test. It's pretty easy to do in Utah, so I went and got that about 24 hours before my flight from Las Vegas, just to make sure that the starting point, if it ended up being Seattle and leaving the country, that I would have the proper testing and everything in order. So I got two tests, and then I was able to go on the flight. And then my second layover, which was in Korea, in Incheon Airport in Seoul, I had to show all my documentation before I could get onto the flight going to Bangkok. So I had to show my Thailand Pass, and I had to show my RT-PCR, and I had to show a number of documents that the Thai government required from me. So I got on that flight, and then when I landed in Bangkok, it was incredibly late at night, and by the time I got to the hotel, it was early hours of the morning. So I got to go to my room and quarantine, and then in the morning they had me come down, and they had someone from the hospital come over and administer the RT-PCR test. About 9 hours later, my test came back and it was negative, and that meant that I was free to go and I was free to travel around the country. So the other requirement was that I test again 5 to 7 days into my trip. They give you, things change, but maybe they'll give you this pink piece of paper, and supposedly it qualifies you to be able to get your second free test in Thailand. And you just have to go to the locations that they have. There's a QR code that you can follow, and we'll put it right here, and it'll tell you where those free testing centers are. So at day 6, I went to the testing center at Atlanta Hospital. That's the one in Chiang Mai. And it was just, initially there was a couple standing outside, and they looked kind of frustrated, and they said that they weren't able to get their second test, and that they were turned away, and they were given a number to call. I went into the hospital and checked, and they said that they were just out of tests for the day, that there wasn't a number to call, but just to come back the next morning, and that you could get the test coming the next day, and they started at 8 a.m. So I went away, came back the next day, and upon arriving there, found out that the hospital only has 50 tests available per day. It just wasn't enough. There were more than 100 people in the room waiting to get the tests. People got kind of panicky, and some people were pushing each other. There was a guy from Korea that was in charge of a group of kids, and he was really worried about getting all those kids in. There was a really sweet couple from Italy that had 2 children, and they were trying to get the tests. And anyway, it was just kind of, it was a little bit sad. And we were able to find out, though, that there were other places that would do these tests, the RT-PCRs, and you just had to pay for them. So we went over to a hospital that we were told about, Rajavaj Hospital in Chiang Mai, and they were able to give us the RT-PCR test for 2,500 baht, which is just under $100, like $80 or something, US dollars. And it was quick to take the test. Also, that cute little Italian family, they were there as well. The test was very quick. It was an easy process. It was a little dramatic in that they had a setup, probably from the early days of COVID, where they had plexiglass little chamber that you would go into, and the person administering the test had to put their hands from the outside into these big, like thick rubber gloves that were affixed to the plexiglass, and they really couldn't move their arms very well, and so they had to like administer the test by like opening the package and getting the swab and putting up your nose, and so it wasn't gentle because the person doing it just had no way of really feeling what was going on. So when I came out of that and then saw that these two cute little kids were gonna have to go in the chamber and have the PCR test administered by these big black gloves, I felt really bad for them. But I think the hospital is probably just wanting to use the equipment that they created, you know, novel. Not detected, so it's negative, that's good. And so anyway, we all got through the test. The cute little Italian family, obviously they had to pay for 4 people for that, which is a lot. So you'll want to factor all of that in. But we found out later that there are many locations where you can pay. So for example, Chiang Mai Medical Center by Patu Chiang Mai Gate. You can go there. I think there's lots of places, private hospitals, in Bangkok and all over the country where you can just pay for this test, and it's usually somewhere in the range of 2,500 baht to up to 4,000 baht, just so you can budget for that. So now I'm on my way home back to the US, and the United States just requires for me to take an antigen test. So I was able to go to Chiang Mai Medical Center and to get the antigen test for 1,000 baht. And they give you, when you take the antigen test, if you're from the US, this is a requirement, and I'm not sure what every country's requirement is, but if you're from that country, you'll find out, you'll know. And the hospital gave us a letter, doctor's letter, that stated that our test results were negative. So I want to remind you that if you do test positive at any point in the test, you will most likely be taken to a hospital. You'll need to navigate things with your insurance, and it could be costly, and then of course you'd be in quarantine in a hospital, and if you have anyone with you in your party, they also go into quarantine, even if they test negative, and so probably just at the hotel. So that's worst case scenario, but I would still encourage you to come because Thailand needs the tourism. It's really hurt the economy here, especially in the areas that relied on tourism. A lot of the people that live here and were working in the tourist industry, teaching massage, traditional medicine, selling crafts and goods, so many people relied on tourism. And it also has a trickle-down effect, and so they really need that money coming into the country because poverty and even possibly starvation, those are real things. And so I'd encourage you to come support the people of Thailand, and also it's wonderful to be here. So I hope you have a safe travel, and I hope you really enjoy your trip and that everything goes well for you. Okay, khap khun ka.